I'm Linda Hirsch.
I'm Jim Carney, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education.
Somewhere along the way, the school fundraiser went from bake sale to gala, and now frequently to writing out big checks. Parents are being asked to fund more and more items that used to be part of the school budget. How much fundraising should parents and sometimes children have to do? My guests today are two working parents from a public school in Upper Manhattan who know all about the burdens of fundraising. Today we discuss the new demands of raising money for schools and the many issues surrounding what may be more than a simple response to budgetary needs.
Later on in the program, I'll visit with someone who wears three hats. She currently is an executive with the Department of Education, a former principal, and a public school parent. But first, we join Linda and her guests in the studio.
My guests today are Alane Salierno Mason, a New York City public school parent and executive editor at W.W. Norton & Company, and Tory Frye, a public school parent advocate, scientist, and faculty member at Columbia University. They are both experienced parent fundraisers. Welcome to EdCast.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here. Elaine, I'm going to start with you because you wrote a provocative piece in the New York Times this past October called "Fed Up with Fundraising for My Kid's School." Why are you fed up?
Well, you know, as a parent, when you hear that your school's budget is being cut, you want to do what you can to help. And we each do what we can depending on our background and what we're able to do. And I had done some fundraising before, so I thought I could bring some of what I had learned from fundraising for other causes to trying to help the school. I did not think the situation was permanent. We were in the middle of a financial crisis. It seemed like this was a moment that required all hands on deck, where everybody should pitch in to do what they could. Well, as time went on and the crisis eased and the situation did not get any better but continued to get worse, I started to see things a little differently. And really my road to Damascus moment was when the group of parents that had been most active in fundraising got a letter from elementary school teachers saying that they had lost or expected to lose the two literacy intervention specialists that they had in the elementary school to help kids who were struggling to learn to read. And could the parents please try to raise money to pay for two literacy intervention specialists, which would cost about $150,000. And I thought, this is impossible. And some of the other parents were saying, how can we reach out to wealthy alumni? And I thought, no, this is not. This is, if the public school cannot help kids who are struggling to learn to read, what is it for?
Okay, so let's go back then and talk about funding for schools in general. Then why is this kind of fundraising so necessary? Are budgets that severely slashed? I mean, what's going on?
Well, I think the context into which Alane walked is very important to note. I mean, since 2007, budgets, school-based budgets in New York City have been cut by 14%. So, and this is during the time that she's describing when there was a financial crisis, but at the same time, the overall budget either remained the same and increased. So the schools were getting less and less money during this period. At the same time, the class sizes were getting larger and larger. So I'm on the CEC in District 6, and our class sizes in 2012-13 were at the highest point that they were at, you know, since about 2003. So parents who were new to this system walked in to diminishing school-based budgets, blossoming class sizes, a financial crisis, and then being asked to fund what are fundamental components of a sound basic public education, which is our statutory right. And I think that context is important to understand in terms of understanding the psychology of these parents when they walk into the school.
I also think getting a letter like that from a teacher, that's pretty compelling. I mean, I'm getting this letter that my school really needs me for something so basic. Now, your school was successful, fairly successful. You're from Upper Manhattan, PS 187. How much money did you raise over that last year or this past year?
Well, last year, between the PTA and the not-for-profit Friends of 187, which Tory helped to start, we raised $185,000.
And what did you use that money for?
Which sounds like a lot of money, except for the fact that the school's budget had been cut by really close to $1.5 million.
Wow.
Out of a total budget of $6 million. So we were using the money for very good things. I'm glad that the school has, for instance, has some second language in the middle school, which otherwise it wouldn't have. It has art programs in the elementary school that it wouldn't have. Junior great books in the 4th or 5th grade. A fantastic organization called Marquee Studios. I think the city should just hire David Marquee to sort of provide an arts program for the entire city, because he is the most professional person I've ever met in the not-for-profit world. I'm grateful that as a parent I got to learn a little bit about these programs, to be involved in helping to decide which ones we might bring in. It's a patchwork and it's a Band-Aid, and it's very hard to establish any continuity from one grade to the next. Our fundraising system is developed enough, parents have been doing this for long enough, that there is now a request for proposals, and we're fairly professional in the way that we evaluate them, and there is an effort to work with the teachers to make sure that these programs are well integrated to what the teachers are trying to do in the classroom, so the teachers are not resisting having people that they don't know come into their classroom. And so that there can be some continuity from year to year. But in the past, I think there have been programs that, because there was one passionate parent, something got brought in.
And
maybe the New York Philharmonic came in to do something, and then the next year it isn't there. And so the kids don't get to build on what they've learned. And
not a real part of the
it's such a
curriculum.
chaotic system. So the Philharmonic then they lost their funding for that. Then they got the funding back,
Right.
and in the middle of the year they want to bring the program back, but the schedule is all full. And
So
it
things
really
like,
doesn't, it's very irrational.
now things like science and arts, and I sit and I listen here and I think, wow, is that enrichment? I mean, shouldn't that be a staple of the curriculum in a school? I mean, we live in New York City, a city rich in the arts, and we would think that. So are these the kind of things that we would expect the schools to pay for? I mean, this just hardly sounds like an extra to me when I look at science and
They are
art,
not-
right?
they are
I mean,
not
to me,
Right.
you know,
and I think that's a very important point. The New York State and the national PTAs, warn against fundraising to support teaching positions
are
and
you
to
allowed
support.
to fund teaching positions?
You're not
No.
actually allowed to fund them, but you can fund what are called F-status teachers,
Okay.
and it's functionally the same thing. And it's described that way, actually, as the art teacher was funded. A certain teacher, and they're named, was funded. And that is a real problem. We are at that point supplanting funds from the state, and that is unacceptable, I think.
Take the DOE off the hook in a way? I mean, if parents are going to all this trouble?
I think that it does, and I think what it really does is it keeps us distracted from the bigger picture, that during this time period when our school-based budgets were being cut, we were busy fundraising or, trying to organize around school-based issues, but it was a system-wide problem, and that's only one part of the picture. There's also the state funding level, the fact that the state has not delivered on its mandates around the settlement for the Campaign for Fiscal Equity. All of that is feeding into the situation where basically the schools are being starved. And the first things to fall out are arts and music and the sciences, and then parents begin to scramble, and we end up in this position where a lot of energy and capital is drained away from a collectivist approach to it. And it also, and I think this is very much happened in our district, it breeds resentment among the schools that can't fundraise.
So there are, now you've raised $180,000, but we know there are some districts that have raised in the millions. I know there was that piece in the Daily News about schools raising over $4 million in wealthy neighborhoods. So what does that do? I mean, is that fair? I mean, what kind of issues come up? You say there was resentment just in the district-wide when there's some schools can do better than others, but what does it say about the whole system where some neighborhoods are doing in the millions? One school auctioned off a Koons, a Jeff Koons piece in Brooklyn.
Wow.
Yeah, wow, right?
Did not know that.
Well,
Yes.
That's a national issue.
Okay.
Inequality in the public schools. I mean, so there are great inequities between urban schools and suburban schools, and from state to state in different parts of a state. The equity issue is hugely important. On the other hand, the way it's been talked about in the media, has been used as another sort of bludgeon with which to attack parents who are trying to do the best that they can for their kids' school. So a few weeks before my op-ed, there was an op-ed by Rob Reich, who's a professor at Stanford in the New York Times, who was suggesting that because parent fundraising is fostering so much inequality in the public school system, parents' donations should not be tax deductible.
Are they now tax deductible?
If they're given to a 501c3,
Okay,
Yeah.
just to clarify.
which many schools now have. But so I could donate a building to Stanford and get a tax deduction for that, but I can't make a modest donation to a public school where a large proportion of the children are poor and get a deduction for that.
That's right.
You
so
can
that
make
doesn't-
deductions to private schools, which we don't seem to, when our concern for equity, we don't seem to talk about the fact that my old prep school in Connecticut can have a 250-acre farm so that its 600 students can learn hands-on organic farming, while a public school cannot afford to do early literacy intervention.
Seems unfair, to say the least.
So,
Okay, I'm sorry.
well, so anyway, so the difference between the schools in often a few blocks away in New York City is just a microcosm of a much, much bigger issue.
Jim Carney had the opportunity to speak with someone who gives yet another perspective on this issue of fundraising. So let's take a look.
Nicky Kram Rosen is the Senior Achievement Technology Facilitator at the Department of Education. She has a unique perspective on school fundraising. She's been a principal, an administrator, and a parent. When people think of fundraising in schools, they think of kids carrying around boxes of candy bars and these catalogs of wrapping paper and that sort of thing. Has fundraising changed in schools today?
There's still some of that going on. I attend my daughter's, I go to movie night at school, or I go to a talent show or a performance, and there's always, bottled water or popcorn or things that I can purchase. Some schools have created outside of what you remember as the Parent Association or the PTA, these 5013Cs, these not-for-profit entities, typically called like Friends of. So Friends of PS 187, PS 87, or whatever school it is. They have events outside the school where they can solicit funds from local merchants, hold auctions or other events, sell t-shirts. It affords them a greater range of options of things they can do that doesn't interrupt the school day, and really takes advantage of the connections and the efforts of the parents and the adults in the community. I think budgets are static for the most part, and I think things are changing in terms of enrollment. I think people don't realize while there is great demand for schools, there's also lower enrollment in some places. Hence, that's why you see charter schools moving in, where zone schools used to fill to capacity. Those zones have shrunk, leaving what is considered like extra space. So the kids are there, they're just not in the public schools. Just doing the work and organizing yourself in an efficient way to ensure that kids know and are able to do the things that they need to do and meet all the mandates and initiatives that are there proves to be challenging. And it sometimes helps when you have extra people around, and so they cost money. If you're going to do something during the school day, you can only do it, I believe, once a year if it involves students sort of participating in it. And if parents are doing something during the regular school day or on property, they can only do that twice a year. So, you have to be sort of creative about working around those parameters that are set up. And whereas the friends of whatever, friends of PS, IS, they don't have those parameters. And so, you know, institutions over time, whether it be Harvard University or, you know, could be City College for that matter, who reach out to their alum and solicit, that's another way to, you know, keep people connected. It would be done by this Friends of to sort of solidify the institution and, you know, keep people connected and interested, like this was a formative educational experience that you have wonderful memories of, and so you're always going to contribute to ensure that it has resources available to it in which to provide some of the things that maybe you remember having.
And now back to Linda and her guest in the studio.
There are obviously many perspectives from the administration point of view, from the teacher, from the parent point of view. And you raised this issue, right? You said earlier that it doesn't seem fair that some people can raise millions of dollars, let's say, for a private school, and maybe you can take certain things off your taxes, and maybe they don't want you to do that here. Should there be a cap on how much parents should be permitted to raise? Anywhere? I mean, should we cap so that PS6 doesn't raise $4 million compared to 180 in Washington Heights compared to 5,000 somewhere else?
I think that conversation has to happen, or that discussion has to happen within a much broader conversation about funding equity for public schools. It is just, as Alane noted before, such a small piece of it. In fact, when this fundraising effort started, the idea that we could fundraise our way out of $1 million budget cut was, they knew, laughable. So the fundraising that goes on at the majority of schools is such a small part of the income, the funding inequity, and to isolate it, again, I think it feels, these parents do feel like they're being bludgeoned and really beaten up for just wanting to help their own kids' school. But it also really distracts from the much bigger drivers of the inequity issue, which is the state level inequities in funding between the suburbs and the cities, the state's refusal to deliver on the promises of the CFE, and the DOE's choice to divert money away from classrooms. We have the lowest number of teachers in our classrooms since 2003 in New York City. So, those are the choices that are really, that's why we can't have a literacy teacher.
I'm going to ask you in a minute just how you did fundraise, but I want to read you a quote from a parent written in response to a Washington Post article about fundraising, and he says, "You can repeat ad nauseum that the school district should pay, but it's not happening. Are you sure we parents should stop funding what our kids need? And then what? Let all the school children become uneducated, unemployable adults because we were sitting on our hands waiting for the government to do its job? I can't respect any parent, any person who would choose that course of inaction. It's just wrong." So what do you say to that? Is it wrong if you have the money and you see that your kids don't have these things and you can fundraise it? Is it wrong? I mean, he says, I have to do it. What do you think?
Yeah.
I think Tory and I might actually disagree about this, and that I don't think it's wrong. I think we have to do what we can to support, especially community schools in, I might feel different if I was in some very wealthy community, but in a community like many in New York City where the school tapestry is very mixed, I think that we are not just feeding the school, but feeding the whole community, and that it is really a great thing to fundraise for the school. Now, whether we should be having to fundraise for so much, no, I think it's just gone way too far. But like that writer, I don't think that equity means that all schools should be equally bad. I think we should be starting from a baseline of having the essentials and a high quality public education in every school. In a city like New York, where the arts are actually a big driver of the economy, of course we should have a first-class arts education in every school. It's not an extra. Science should not be an extra in an increasingly technological society. And then if we want to, fundraise for field trips or something that really is extra, great. I think that the imagination and parent creativity that goes into thinking of programs that we would like to have. I'd love to see our school have a Latin club. So let the community get together to support that, or to support a chess club. But the literacy tutoring should not be something that parents have to raise money for.
Tory, what do you say?
Well, I mean, I think we as a public school parent community have struggled with this question quite a bit. And I think what happens sometimes when parents come together to fundraise, either in situations where there's a crisis or otherwise, is that it drains away a lot of the capital and energy and organizing ability from the larger battle. And so at this, while I understand this perspective that it's very hard to withhold that energy and capital and those resources from your child's school and direct it towards something larger, I do think that it is worthwhile, because I think that's actually the only way that we begin to move the needle on the political will to address this issue.
Do you think parents feel a pressure? I mean, there is some pressure, but for some parents, to contribute money, I know schools often say, write a check. I mean, what kind of pressure do you think there is for parents? And also, are children being asked to participate in fundraising, and is that bad or good?
Children are asked to participate in fundraising for their own grade-based or within school activities. And it's an interesting question, because I think in a way what we're doing is we're priming them and we're training them for this model that we have in the United States.
Careers,
right?
in the future.
Important careers as bake sale managers when they're
fundraisers.
Right. So I think that that's worth noting, that this is a system that, as much as we're sitting here, discussing how difficult it is and how problematic it is, this is the system that we as a society have chosen and have agreed upon, and we're even training our children for it. So if you want, something in your school that you guys think you really need, you're going to have to fundraise for it, because the state is not going to give it to you.
Is there a plus, though, to kids making a commitment to their school, or feeling an investment in their school, or working as a community to do something together? I mean, is that possible?
Yeah, I think so. I think my kids have gotten a tremendous amount out of helping to sell Christmas trees at the tree sale and that kind of thing. What I don't want them doing is trying to sell people things that they don't need, like going around with that catalog to make
watch
people
television
buy
for that. I mean,
and to where they are actually involved in marketing for a company, because the school will then get a fraction of that company's profits.
Yeah.
And I don't ask them to do that.
Yeah.
But I think the community centered events, things like Schoolapalooza and Kid Fit, which I think have a lot, they're as much about community building as they are about fundraising. I think it's wonderful for them to be involved in those things.
there was a quote I found from Michael Rebell, who directs the Campaign for Educational Equity at Teachers College, and he said that private spending in public education is a legal issue, because he says, according to the state constitution, all students are guaranteed a quality education for free. So then the question now becomes, what's quality, and how do you provide quality, and are the schools providing quality for free? So would you agree with him that this is the part of the heart of the matter, that
Absolutely.
they're not meeting a mandate?
Absolutely, absolutely. And he is, I hope, going to relitigate this issue on behalf of the parents of New York City, because we have not met that standard. The state has not met that standard. And as a result, parents are having to fundraise for the basics, for literacy coaches, for classroom teachers, for parts of a well-rounded curricula that is part of our statutory right as citizens and our children's rights.
Are there any better ways of doing this? Any ways of collecting money or doing fundraising that would be fairer across districts or across communities?
There was one called taxation. I don't think people really, but of course it's not just about, all discussions about education in New York seem to devolve into this tax the rich, blame the union discussion.
Right.
And and since, as Tory points out, the Department of Ed's budget was actually going up while the individual school budgets were going down, part of this is actually about where are our collective resources going?
Okay. We only have less than a minute, I think, so I just want to ask you both, will you answer the next fundraising call?
I stopped. I will do some, but at the time that this big effort began, I actually withdrew from the fundraising efforts. I will write checks to the best of my ability, but I diverted all of my energies to organizing our district around these political issues and these policy issues.
And what about you, Alane? What do you think?
Well, I also will continue to donate, but I have also withdrawn from the fundraising organization and am trying to focus more on encouraging literacy in the district as a whole.
Great. I want to thank you both for joining us today on EdCast. This is a really big topic in many ways because under the surface are really many other issues than just raising money for a school. So thank you both for joining us today. Alane Mason, Tory Frye, thanks again so much.
Thanks for
Linda.
having me.
And don't go away. We'll be right back with our Ed Bites. Welcome back to this edition of Ed Bites.
The relatively new essay section on the SAT is supposed to measure students' writing skills. But some educators believe the essay portion is turning students into bad writers. In an interview on NPR, Professor Ann Ruggles-Geer of the University of Michigan states that teachers teach to the test, and that the short 25 minutes allotted for writing leads to shoddy writing and shoddy ideas. Students are advised to go for length, big words, and follow a formula. In addition, students often fabricate stories to catch the attention of scorers who read at least 20 essays in an hour. Ruggles-Geer maintains that that kind of writing that gets high scores is simply not good writing.
The need for pre-K education was given a further boost by recent research. Education Week reports that a study following children from kindergarten through middle school found that only a third were on track with cognitive skills by third grade. 56% were on track with physical development, 70% with social and emotional growth, and 74% in their level in school engagement. But there were great disparities. The numbers were lower for Black and Hispanic children and children growing up in poverty. Only 19% of third graders in low-income families were meeting their cognitive development milestones, compared to 50% of children and families at the higher income levels. To address these gaps, the report recommends quality birth-through-8 education programs for children from low-income families and fostering communication between child care providers and schools to enable children to make the transition from preschool to kindergarten.
Well, that does it for this edition of EdCast.
Until next time, class dismissed.